This is The Metaphysics of War by Julius Evola, Chapter 4, The Greater War and the Lesser War. Originally published on the 21st of July, 1935 as La Grande e la Piccola Guerra in diorama mensile Il Regime Fascista. Our readers should not consider it strange that, after having examined a group of Western traditions relating to holy war, that is to say, war as a spiritual value, we now propose to examine this same concept as expressed in the Islamic tradition. In fact, for our purposes, as we have often pointed out, it is interesting to clarify the objective value of a principle by means of the demonstration of its universality, that is to say, of its conformity to the principle of quod ubique, quod ab omnibus, et quod semper. And citation for that, Latin translation, that which is accepted everywhere by everyone and always. This is an axiom of the Catholic Church. Only in this way can we establish with certainty that some values are absolutely independent of the views of any particular thinker, and that, also, in their essence, they are superior to the particular forms which they have assumed in order to manifest themselves in one or another historical tradition. The more we manage to demonstrate the inner correspondence of such forms and their unique principle, the more deeply the reader will become able to delve into his own tradition, to possess it fully, and to understand it from its own unique metaphysical point of origin. Historically, in order to comprehend what concerns us here, it must first be understood that the Islamic tradition, rather than having such a unique metaphysical point of origin, is essentially dependent upon its inheritance of the Persian tradition. Persia, as is well known, having possessed one of the highest pre-European civilizations. The original Mazdaist conception of religion as military service under the sign of the God of Light and of existence as a continuous, relentless struggle to rescue beings and things from the control of an anti-God is at the center of the Persian vision of life, and should be considered as the metaphysical counterpart and spiritual background to the warrior enterprises which culminated in the creation of the empire of the King of Kings by the Persians. After the fall of Persia's power, echoes of such traditions persisted in the cycle of medieval Arabian civilizations in forms which became slightly more materialistic and sometimes exaggerated, yet not to such an extent that their original elements of spirituality were entirely lost. We bring up tradition of this kind here, above all, because they introduce a concept which is very useful in further clarifying the order of ideas set out in our latest articles, namely, the concept of the greater or holy war as distinct from the lesser war, but at the same time as related to the latter in a specifically special manner. The distinction itself derives from a saying of the prophet, who returning from a battle declared, "I return now from the lesser to the greater war." And the citation for that, this is recorded in the hadith or oral traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, specifically in the Tariq Baghdad or Khatib al-Baghdadi, 13:493, 523. So that would be, I presume, chapter 13, verses 493 to verses 523, or perhaps just those two specific verses on their own. So verse 493 and verse 523. We continue here with the citation. The text goes on to say that Muhammad's followers asked him, "What is the greater war?" To which he replied, "The war against the lower part of our nature." Intriguing. The lesser war here corresponds to the exoteric war. Perhaps they mean esoteric, possibly an issue in translation. Anyway, continuing from the top of this paragraph. The lesser war here corresponds to the esoteric war, the bloody battle which is fought with material arms against the enemy, against the barbarian, against an inferior race over whom a superior right is claimed, or, finally, when the event is motivated by a religious justification against the infidel. No matter how terrible and tragic the events, no matter how huge the destruction, this war, metaphysically speaking, still remains a lesser war. The greater or holy war is, contrarily, of the interior and intangible order. It is the war which is fought against the enemy, the barbarian, the infidel whom everyone bears in himself, or whom everyone can see arising in himself on every occasion that he tries to subject his whole being to a spiritual law, appearing in the form of craving, partiality, passion, instinctuality, weakness, and inward cowardice. The enemy within the nature man must be vanquished, its resistance broken, chained and subjected to the spiritual man, this being the condition of reaching inner liberation, the triumphant peace, which allows one to participate in what is beyond both life and death. Some may say that this is simply asceticism. The greater holy war is the ascesis which has always been a philosophical goal. It could be tempting to add as well, it is the path of those who wish to escape from this world and who, using the excuse of inner liberation, become a herd of pacifist cowards. This is not at all the way things are. After the distinction between the two types of war, there is their synthesis. It is a feature of heroic traditions that they prescribe the lesser war, that is to say, the real bloody war, as an instrument in the realization of the greater or holy war. So much so that finally both become one and the same thing in the end. Thus, in Islam, holy war or jihad and the path of God are interchangeable terms. The one who fights is on the path of God. A well-known and quite characteristic saying of this tradition is, "The blood of heroes is closer to the Lord than the ink of scholars and the prayers of the pious." Citation for that: I am uncertain of the origin of this saying, but it is contradicted by another hadith taken from the Al-Jami al-Saghir of Imam al-Suyuti. The ink of the scholar is holier than the blood of the martyr. I do apologize for butchering these, I want to say either Persian or possibly Arabic terms. Continuing. Once again, as is common in the traditions already reviewed by us, as in the Roman ascesis of power and in the classical mors triumphalis, action attains the value of an inner overcoming and of a approximation to a life no longer mixed with darkness, contingency, uncertainty, and death. In more concrete terms, the predicaments, risks, and ordeals peculiar to the events of war bring about an emergence of the inner enemy, which in the forms of the instinct of self-preservation, cowardice, cruelty, pity, and blind riotousness arise as obstacles to be vanquished, just as one fights the outer enemy. It is clear from this that the decisive point is constituted by one's inner orientation, one's unshakable persistence in what is spiritual in this double struggle, so that an irresistible and blind changing of oneself into a sort of wild animal does not occur, but instead a way is found of not letting the deepest forces escape, a way of seeing to it that one is never overwhelmed inwardly, and that one always remains supreme master of oneself. And precisely because of this sovereignty, one remains able to affirm himself against even every possible limitation. In a tradition to which we will dedicate our next article, this situation is represented by a most characteristic symbol, The warrior is accompanied by an impassive divine being, whom, without fighting, leads and guides him in his struggle, side by side with him in the same war chariot. This symbol is the personified expression of a duality of principles which the true hero, from whom something sacred always emanates, maintains unceasingly within himself. To return to the Islamic tradition, we can read in its principal text, "So let those who sell the life of this world for the next world fight in the way of Allah. If someone fights in the way of Allah, whether he is killed or is victorious, we will pay him an immense reward." And we have here 4:74, as well as a hyperlink to another thing furthering that citation. So I presume that to mean chapter 4, verse 74, but just in case, we have here citation 5, "The Noble Quran, a new rendering of its meaning in English, in brackets, Norwich Bookwork 2005, interpreted by Aisha Bewley. All quotes from the Quran are taken from this edition." Interesting. Continuing. The metaphysical premises for this are prescribed as follows. Fight in the way of Allah against those who fight for you. In brackets here, 2:190, so that'd be chapter 2, verse 190. Kill them wherever you come across them. 2 written as a Roman numeral, so that would be, again, chapter 2, verse 191. Do not become faint-hearted and call for peace. 47:35, so chapter 47, verse 35. The life of this world is merely a game and a diversion. Chapter 47, verse 36. But whoever is tight-fisted is only tight-fisted unto himself. Chapter 47, verse 38. This last principle is obviously a parallel to the evangelical text, "Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life shall preserve it." And we have here a citation for that. Roman Catholic Holy Bible, Luke chapter 17, verse 33, as rendered in the Holy Bible. Oh, pardon me. This is the, I want to say British version of it. The New King James Bible, Nashville T. Nelson, 1982. So that would be the Protestant version. Nonetheless, it's close enough. Continuing. Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life shall preserve it, as is confirmed by these further passages. You who have iman, exclamation point, and citation for that is Arabic, iman translates to belief. You who have belief, what is the matter with you that when you are told, go out and fight in the way of Allah, you sink down heavily to the earth? Are you happier with this world than the next world? Chapter 9, verse 38. Say unto the companions, what do you await for us except for one of the 2 best things, martyrdom or victory? In brackets, chapter 9, verse 52. These excerpts, too, are worth noting. Fighting is prescribed for you even if it is hateful to you. It may be that you hate something when it is good for you, and it may be that you love something when it is bad for you. Allah knows, and you do not know. Chapter 2, verse 216. Oh, that must be a very long book. And also, when a surah... Okay, what is a surah? A surah is a chapter of the Quran. Intriguing. When a surah is sent down saying, have iman in Allah and do jihad together with his messenger, those among them with wealth will ask you to excuse them, saying, let us remain with those who stay behind. They are pleased to be with those who stay behind. Their hearts have been stamped so they do not understand. But the messenger and those who have iman along with him have done jihad with their wealth and with themselves. They are the people who will have the good things. They are the ones who are successful. Chapter 9, verses 86 through 89. Therefore, we have here a sort of amor fati. Okay, what is an amor fati? Love of fate. Therefore, we have here a sort of love of fate, a mysterious way of intuiting evoking and heroically resolving one's own destiny in the intimate certainty that when the right intention is present, when all indolence and cowardice are vanquished, and the leap beyond the lives of oneself and others, beyond happiness and misfortune, is driven by a sense of spiritual destiny and a thirst for the absolute existence, then one has given birth to a force which will not be able to miss the supreme goal. Then the crisis of tragic and heroic death becomes an insignificant contingency which can be expressed in religious terms in the following words. As for those who fight in the way of Allah, He will not let their actions go astray. He shall guide them and better their condition, and He will admit them into the garden which He has made known to them. Chapter 47, verses 4 through 6. As if by a circular path, the reader is thus brought back to the same ideas which were examined in our previous writings on the subject of tradition, whether classical or Nordic medieval. That is to say, to the idea of a privileged immorality reserved for heroes alone. Heroes, who alone, according to Hesiod, pass on to inhabit symbolic islands, which image forth the bright and intangible existence of the Olympians. And we have here a note stating, the Olympians are the gods of the Greek pantheon. Additionally, in the Islamic tradition, there are frequent references to the idea that some warriors fallen in the sacred war are in reality not truly dead. Okay, we have citation for that. For example, in Quran chapter 1, verse 154, do not say that those who are killed in the way of Allah are dead. On the contrary, they are alive, but you are unaware of it. So I'm going to pick up from the start of that sentence. Additionally, in the Islamic tradition, there are frequent references to the idea that some warriors fallen in the sacred war are in reality not dead, in a sense which is not symbolic in any way, and which need not be referred to supernatural states cut off from the energies and destinies of the living. I do believe there's an error in translation there, but I see no purpose in rereading that sentence. It is not possible to enter into this domain, which is rather mysterious and requires the support of references which would ill befit the present article. What we can say definitively is that even today, and particularly in Italy, the rites by which a warrior community declares its most heroically fallen companions still present have regained a special evocative force. He who begins from the belief that everything which, by a process of involution, retains today only an allegorical and, at best, moral character, whereas it originally possessed the value of reality, and every rite contained real action, and not mere ceremony. For him, these warrior rites of today could perhaps provide material for meditation, and he could perhaps approach the mystery contained in the teachings already quoted. That is, the idea of heroes who really never died, and the idea of victors who, like the Roman Emperor Caesar, remain as perpetual victors. Oh, actually, Caesar just means king. So, who, like the Roman Caesar, remain as perpetual victors at the center of a human stock. I'm going to reread that final sentence here, just to sort of ponder on it. He who begins from the belief that everything which, by a process of involution, retains today only an allegorical and, at best, moral character, whereas it originally possessed the value of reality, and every rite contained real action and not mere ceremony. For him, these warrior rites of today could perhaps provide material for meditation, and he could perhaps approach the mystery contained in the teaching already quoted. That is, the idea of heroes who never really died, and the idea of victors who, like the Roman Caesar, remain as perpetual victors at the center of a human stock. So that concludes Chapter 4. Chapter 5, the Metaphysics of War, from which this text is actually named, will be in the following video of this series, and I hope to do that at some time within the next few weeks to a month. We shall see. Anyway, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful evening.